Yo, what is up? It is your boy Xehther here, and I'm back to drop What If Deku Had Tasmanian Powers. It's been a while since I felt the OG vibes running through me, and it's about time that I could bring back something that OG Xehther would have probably made. Something like, what if Deku had Tasmanian devil powers? This what if in particular is actually going to be in collaboration with We the Celestials. Yup, the people that you probably never expected to be featuring on this channel are finally going to be featuring on this channel. So definitely make sure you guys check them out if you guys like their voice or anything about them, and show them some love. Let them know Xehther sent you. But with all that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
It's been quite some time since I've stayed up all night thinking about a what if and just being so excited to record something. What if Deku had Tasmanian powers is probably going to be one of the goofiest what ifs that I'm going to do in a while. So definitely make sure if you guys like this one, y'all leave a like on this one because a lot of hard work's going into it. But let's get into it. So, all right, so I first got to start this what if by explaining to you guys what Tasmanian powers are. Have you guys seen Lego Ninjago? Yes, you have? Okay, perfect. That's pretty much what it is. He's going to have the ability to spin around like crazy, like a mini tornado, and rip things to shred. If you guys have ever seen Looney Tunes or the Looney Tunes show, then you guys know my boy Tazz, he don't play no games. He has tornado powers. He has enhanced strength, retractable claws, enhanced speed, and he can create a decent sized tornadoes. That's pretty much going to be the quirk that Deku's going to be born with. And the day that Izuku's born, the bro's literally going to look like a furry. Bro's literally gonna look like a furry. It's gonna be a tragic upbringing, but you know, like there's nothing that a little haircut can't fix, right? But regardless, when Izuku's born, Inko looks at him and she's like, "Hey, yo, like what is this?" But since in the world of My Hero, those kinds of things and like physical aspect changes aren't seen that crazy, so Izuku will be just fine. But during his early years, he will have a little bit of fur on him, and one thing that Inko will notice is that Izuku will grow up being a little bit aggro. He's a little angry to anger, and you know, he's going to be very much so kind of like Bakugo when it comes to his temperament. He's not going to be the normal person that he will be in the original, and Deku will always be hungry. Deku will have an ability to be able to literally consume anything, whether it be wood, concrete, stone, plastic. He can literally eat anything. He has these sharp teeth that Izuku can use to just absolutely eat anything, and his stomach is created as such to the point where he can consume anything and digest whatever it is that he wants. Izuku would spend his first couple of years being very powerful just due to the fact that Izuku doesn't get his quirk, he's born with it. And his quirk would be called Tasmanian Devil, as it would be a huge reference to the popular and iconic show Looney Tunes that would have came out years and years ago. And Deku and Bakugo this time are going to be extremely good friends in this timeline. You guys might be wondering why. Well, let me break it down to you guys. Deku's pretty much going to be a more aggressive Bakugo with a huge appetite and just this lust to become the strongest hero ever. Deku's going to be just this really cool badass kid growing up. And when Deku grows up, he and Bakugo are going to be training day after day after day after day after day. Like they go crazy with the training, let me tell you guys that. And when it comes to their training, Izuku would spend his first couple years just pretty much using his tornado-like ability, using this spinjitzu kind of, right? As you know, he spins and spins and spins and spins. And Izuku at first would get very much so dizzy, but eventually he would get used to it. And by the time that he would get to the last years of middle school, Izuku would pretty much be a pro at using his tornado-like abilities. He just spins out of control. And when it comes to his claws, Izuku would have gotten to a point where he's so physically strong, he could just tear something. Like if he really wanted to, he could slash at someone's body and literally cut them like easily, right? And just this alone would make Izuku very much so powerful. But just keep in mind, having claws and having enhanced strength and having this tornado-like ability will definitely keep him very much so powerful, but he's not going to exactly be the most powerful in the verse. Like, a lot of people will still definitely be able to beat him. Like, let's say someone like Todoroki was facing off against him, he'd probably get his money ran for if Todoroki was to use his fire. But ice, ain't no way, because Deku's running through that ice by simply spinning through it. Someone like Bakugo can pretty much just keep a distance, and using his ability to fly through midair could try to keep away from Deku, but Deku can kind of sort of levitate, because by spinning so fast, he can fly up into the air for a short burst of time and try to reach Bakugo, which is something that Deku would have learned after years and years of facing off against Bakugo. This time around, Bakugo and Deku would be so close, they might as well be brothers. They literally switch off at sleeping at each other's houses often, and they're always together. Like, you literally cannot see Deku and Bakugo not together. It's a rarity. It's the biggest rarity ever if you were to see something like that. But pretty much, Deku and Bakugo grow up and they are just the bestest of friends. Bakugo gets a lot stronger because of the fact that he has such a worthy training partner, and Deku would always get stronger just because he has as well a very much so worthy training partner. They both, they chill and they hang out and, they do all their things together. And eventually the day of middle school will come where the teacher busts in the classroom and he's all like, all right, kids, have you guys thought about your futures? Yes, no, maybe. Well, here are some career aptitude tests. And everybody's like, oh, like seriously? And the teacher's like, well, you really thought I was playing? And then he throws them in the air and goes, I was just playing, boys. Like I know y'all want to become heroes. And everybody just looks at him and they're like, oh yeah, like they start using their quirks and stuff. And Deku would be in the back of the classroom, just like arms crossed and just literally passed out as Bakugo steps on top of the desk and goes, Deku! And Deku wakes up and he's like, huh? And he then goes, me and Deku are gonna become the number 1 and 2 heroes someday, and we're gonna be the first two to go into the UA school and become something out of this cruddy school. And Deku stands up on the desk and he's like, yeah. And Bakugo's like, all right, well, yeah. They just sit back down, and from here the lesson continues. After this, Bakugo would be like, hey Izuku, let's go back to my place and chill. But Deku's like, nah, Bakugo, I think I'm actually gonna go home. It's gonna be a special day for my mom tomorrow, and my dad's actually gonna be home. So I figure that I'd be there and hang out with them, seeing as it's my mom's birthday tomorrow. Bakugo's like, all right. Make sure you tell your mom I said happy birthday, and I'll drop by tomorrow to give her a little gift. And Deku's like, all right, Bakugo, I'll catch you later. From here, he grabs his stuff and makes his way towards the house. He realizes, crap, I'm late, and begins running towards a different path that he usually doesn't take. As he's running, a sewer lid would start to pretty much start shaking, and Izuku turns around being like, what the? As he looks at it, and this green sludgy monster thing comes flying out as it's like, give me your body, kid. Deku, looking at the green sludge monster, would be like, ugh, you freak. As he's like, what is that? And the sludge monster rises and rises and rises until ultimately it covers Deku, and Deku watches as the sludge monster just continuously grabs him and tries to go into his mouth. Izuku's like, oh, like this tastes horrible, right? And then Izuku's like, get off of me, as he starts spinning like crazy like a tornado, and the sludge monster literally just gets sent splattering everywhere, right? As Deku, like his claws come out and his teeth get sharper. And he's all like, you mess with the wrong guy today, as he lunges at the sludge villain, and the sludge villain gets scared. And right as Izuku's about to pounce on it and like start like slashing at it and continuing to spin, All Might appears and he's like, I am here. As he realizes that this kid literally is scaring the sludge monster, and All Might's like, hey kid, stop. As Izuku looks at All Might and he's like, All Might. Like, he looks at him and the claws go back in, the teeth will finally go back to normal. And like he looks at All Might and he's like All Might, I'm literally like your biggest fan ever. And All Might's like, happy to hear that. I always am happy to love support from my fans. And Deku's like, oh, I'm not just a fan. Like, I literally, like, I love you so much, All Might. Like, could I please get your autograph? And the sludge villain is just trying to like crawl away. But Izuku looks at All Might and he's like, hey, All Might, the thing's trying to get away. And All Might's like, all right. And then he bottles up the sludge villain with the help of Deku, as Deku asks All Might, what's the next thing that's going to happen now? And All Might just goes, well, I'm going to go turn this thing into the villains. And Deku goes, think I got what it takes to be the number 1? And All Might goes, guess time will tell, but to be a hero, kid, you'll definitely be a great one. The way that you acted once a villain was in front of you is something that not a lot of kids your age have. Are you going to be going to UA by any chance? Izuku goes, yeah. And All Might from here, realizing that his time limit is almost up, just jumps off and goes, I'll see you there. As you know, he flies off, and being clumsy, All Might drops the sludge villain, right? Now the sludge villain falls on Bakugo, and Bakugo absolutely gets captured by the sludge villain, as the sludge villain itself captures Bakugo and explosions would start going off. Izuku, noticing this, would subconsciously walk over there because he still is going to be kind of nerdy, and once he arrives and he notices it's Bakugo, Deku's not playing around. Deku would immediately jump over the crowd as he grabs onto one of the light poles, spinning off of it, running on top of the building. Izuku then jumps down and starts spinning as fast as he can, and the sludge villain looking at him, he's like, get away from me, kid. I promise I'll kill him if you don't. And from here, Izuku just spins in there, and like the sludge villain splatters everywhere. And Bakugo's like, ah! As you know, Deku's like, chill out, Bakugo. I'm right here. I'm not trying to get blown to smithereens. And Bakugo goes, Deku, I knew that causing a scene would probably attract you here. And from here, Deku goes, of course it has, as he grabs Bakugo by the arm and rips him out. And then he goes, what do you say we use a little combo move? And Bakugo just goes, love it. As Izuku spins and grabs Bakugo by the arm, and he spins and spins and spins, throwing Bakugo straight at the sludge villain with a huge explosion that causes a massive like sonic boom, right? And from here, everybody watching on would be like, yeah, like those two kids rule. And you know, Deku and Bakugo would just be looking at each other as they're smirking away, and you know, they're just thinking to themselves that they definitely went off right there, right? Now from here, reporters come in and they start talking to both kids. They're like, wow, like kid, like what's it like to save that? And then they're like, what's your relationship to the kid? And they're like, we're best friends and we're gonna make it to UA. And from here, you know, they both go off and they end up doing their own things, right? And what pretty much ends up happening is Deku goes over towards the direction of his house finally after dapping Bakugo up and being like, all right, catch you later, man. And you know, the other one goes, yeah, sure, Izuku, I'll see you later. And from here, he goes, remember, tell your mom I said happy birthday. He runs off, and from the corner, All Might comes and barges in the way of Deku, and he's like, I am. As you know, the blood comes out, and All Might reveals to Izuku, yeah, he's really not as strong as he seems. And from here, Izuku's like, imposter, as he gets into fighting stance, and All Might just goes, no, kid, seriously, I'm not an imposter. And then he goes on to explain, all right, look, as he tells him, this is how All for One works. I was injured, and yeah. And from here, Izuku's like, oh, okay, I guess I believe it. And All Might just looks at Deku and he's like, yeah, but anyways, point being, I think that you'd be a worthy successor. Sorry about that, boys. But he just goes, I think that you'd be a worthy successor. And, you know, Izuku looks to All Might and he's like, seriously? Like, All Might, you could have picked anybody in the world and you chose me? And, you know, All Might looks at him and he's like, yeah, of course I did, kid. I mean, who else would I choose? Water break. Much better. Anyways, he goes, who else would I choose? And, you know, Deku just looks at All Might and goes, I mean, I don't know. And, you know, from here, All Might says, tell you what, kid, meet me at Dagoba Beach in 2 days and we can start training. And Deku just looks at him and goes, 2 days is perfect. My mom's birthday's tomorrow. And All Might just goes, oh, well, wish your mother happy birthday. And he gives him a signed autograph saying happy birthday, Inko, right? And from here, Izuku's just ecstatic. Like, he just got the #1 hero's, like, autograph. He immediately goes home and calls Bakugo. He's like, Bakugo, you will not believe who just ran into me and just offered me the biggest thing in the world. And Bakugo's like, what, Deku? And Deku's like, bro, All Might literally is inviting me to train. He wants me to like be a successor. And Bakugo listening to this is like, ain't no way. And from here, you know, they both link up as Bakugo comes over to Deku's house as they're having dinner. And Deku's like, bro, like you wouldn't believe this. And he tells everybody at the table, he's like, mom, like All Might literally wants to train me. And he spits his food out and he's like, All Might. And Izuku's like, not only that, but he gave you this. And he gives her this like signed autograph of All Might saying happy birthday. And she's like, oh my God, like you're serious. And Izuku's like, I have his number. And he shows it. And it's All Might sending him a picture of a selfie saying, see you then, right? As Izuku looks to his mom and he's like, mom, like I'm gonna train under All Might. And Bakugo's so excited, and he's literally so excited for Deku. There's not even a hint of like jealousy or that should be me or anything. Like Bakugo, like Deku is like a brother to Bakugo, and he would never be jealous of his own brother, right? Like regardless of what the situation is. And so they're both just so happy. Eventually they make it up to Deku's room, and they just play video games for the rest of the night. Like they're straight chilling. They're playing video games, and Deku and Bakugo are just doing their thing, right? And pretty much what would end up happening is Izuku goes on to Izuku goes on to essentially tell Bakugo that like he's so excited, and Bakugo's just playing the game. He's like, I bet, as he beats Deku, and he's like, take that L. And Deku's like, oh, I'll take any L from now on, considering I'm gonna be training under All Might. And he starts bragging, and Bakugo's just like, shut up, dude. Like, hey, put in a good word for me. I want to train under All Might too. And Deku's like, bro, like I was already thinking of that. Like the day we go, I'm bringing you with me. And Bakugo's like, ah, sweet. So eventually the day would come where Izuku was meant to be All Might on Dagoba Beach. And when Izuku gets there, he looks to All Might and pops up with Bakugo as All Might's like, oh, you're that kid from the incident, right? And Bakugo's like, yeah, it's me. Like, I'm a pretty big fan as well. I'm like Izuku's brother. And from here, you know, All Might's like, oh, so I'm guessing you also want training as well? And Bakugo looks at him and says, don't worry. Like, I'm just here to train and do the same thing Deku does. Like, I want to become strong as well. And Deku just vouches for Bakugo. He's like, trust me, like this kid has potential. Like he's just as strong as me, if not stronger. And All Might hearing this would be very much so intrigued. He's like, is that so? From here, he goes on to look at Bakugo and say, well, welcome to the team, Bakugo, slapping Bakugo on the back, being like, ha, 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 ha. As, you know, Bakugo just looks at Izuku and he's like, okay. And from here, you know, they start training. All Might gives them both the same regimen, and they both start getting their bodies ready. Bakugo only does it because, you know, he's training, but Izuku's the one who's going to actually get one for all, right? Now, the training would commence. They start cleaning the beach. Training montage music starts commencing, and and eventually they would make it to the point where they finally get to the day of the 10-month training being over. And at this point, All Might, Deku, and Bakugo are literally as close as you can get. Like they've been seeing each other for hours every single day, and All Might has become sort of a third parental figure to both of them, where they both respect him so much. And once Izuku finally gets handed the quirk of One for All, Izuku would not know how to control it, considering that, you know, he just gave it to him. But seeing as this version of Deku is a lot more powerful, I say he'll probably be able to handle it. He does learn the clench your butt cheeks and think One for All thing, obviously, and you know, they would both make it to the day of the test, right? They make it to UA, take the written portion, eat as a little annoying sack of filth like usual, and eventually they make their way towards the combat portion. Now, obviously, both are split up just due to the fact that they don't want them together, and what pretty much ends up happening from here is Izuku and Bakugo get ready to, you know, start fighting and, you know, like doing their own things, right? And, you know, they're both excited. Like, how excited would you be if you both train together and you're just ready to show the world how skilled you really are? Like, they are hype. Let me tell you, they're hype. And what pretty much ends up happening is eventually President Mike lets down the doors and everybody's allowed to go over, right? And Izuku, he's just like, oh yeah, like, let's do this. He immediately spins in there, and just like as soon as he sees the first robot, Izuku's claws come in and just bam, slashes at that thing, destroying it completely, rushing at more and more robots. As using all that training that he's gotten from All Might, he would be able to create like a level 3 tornado, which would be able to suck in robots and even some people if they're not careful, right? But luckily, you know, they're all pro heroes in training, so they would be able to dodge it. And you know what happens is Izuku gets more and more points by the second, and Izuku's just starting to go crazy. Like, my boy literally gets so many points that All Might would be shocked. Using his claws, his strength, and his IQ, Izuku would be able to amass a grand total of 162 robot points by the time that All Might could say, like, wow. And Izuku's literally doing all of this with nothing but his own quirk, not even activating One for All quite yet. But ultimately, eventually what would happen is rumbling could be heard from the ground, and everybody would look up to see a 0-pointer. Ida and everybody else would run away, but not Deku. Deku, seeing this thing, would think to himself, This is the test that I needed. As he looks and he hears somebody, help, help. And Izuku, once he sees Uraraka on the floor, he just thinks to himself, oh, I'll definitely help. And I'm gonna crush this thing before it gets even a second closer to you, right? He blitzes towards Uraraka with his tornado spin move, and he rushes her back towards the safe area as Izuku looks at her and says, stay here. And from here, Izuku goes, blah, 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 and pretty much blitzes over towards the direction of the 0 pointer, right? As, you know, a gigantic tornado would form. And like this thing would be so powerful. It's like a huge level tornado, right? Now Izuku would be using the power of One for All at like literally like 20%, and that would be more than enough to form a massive tornado, but Izuku pushes it further and further, eventually making it to 100%. Not that he's always capable of using it, but he would rush it 100%, and the tornado would get massive as he literally rips an entire tornado-sized hole into the 0 pointer, and buildings would have gotten shot up into it. Izuku stops it, and by the time that he does, Izuku's body would feel like it was just torn to shreds. Izuku's body feels like he just spent 24 hours in the gym going to failure with each and every single rep. And Izuku, after he takes out the 0 pointer, he would look up and see all the destruction he caused, thinking to himself, maybe I overdid it a little bit. But ladies and gentlemen, that is where my part is going to be ending, and I'm going to be going ahead and handing the mic over to We the Celestials.
Hey, what is up mortals? It is Xehther here, and let's keep this going. After the exam, Deku and Bakugo both get the message from All Might, letting them know that they've both been accepted into the UA High. Starting with the first day at UA, Aizawa's exam. The main biggest changes that actually happen here is Deku launches the ball basically into space. It is just gone. And of course, without Deku failing most of the tests, because of his new speed and him just being able to blitz most things, the obvious student to expel becomes Mineta, who by day's end is expelled from UA High. Good rinse. Skipping forward a little bit, we get to the heroes vs villains mock battle. The teams will be staying the same as usual, with Deku and Ochako on one team and Bakugo and Ida on the other. Now, Deku and Bakugo actually knowing what each other is capable of, they're both going to make a beeline straight for each other. So there's basically two fights going on. There is Bakugo and Deku clashing and basically demolishing sections of the building. And then upstairs, there's a lot smaller of a scale battle of Ida versus Ochako, with Ochako on the defensive, basically trying to avoid getting caught, and Ida blitzing around. Both of these fights are going to go on for pretty much the entire duration of this, until there's basically 30 seconds left on the clock, and Deku realizes that he has to do something. So what does he do? He charges up One for All, supercharges himself, smashes through the window, bounces off one of the other buildings, and goes straight in through the wall, grabbing the actual bomb, smashing through the other wall, and going flying with it. He spins mid-air and launches it up into the sky, with it eventually coming down somewhere else. Bakugo is actually quite impressed by this. He is definitely not happy that he lost that, but Deku's speed and the way he reacted, now that was impressive. Ochako and Ida just left speechless. Neither of them had any idea how to even try to react to that situation. He just basically flew through the building, taking the bomb and leaving. There was absolutely nothing they could have tried to do. Now everyone else's little test will go pretty much exactly the same as it normally would. So we can skip ahead a bit more, and we can see Deku and Bakugo actually training against each other now. Deku using One for All, which gives him a leg up, and Bakugo learning to adapt to being on the defensive a bit more. He's actually coming up with a few new strategies to actually block One for All, making him pretty much the only student in the entire class who can actually do anything to try and stop Deku. After a couple weeks of training, it's time for the USJ incident. Things start off pretty much the same as usual, with All Might not showing up due to overusing One for All, and then the villains show up. The main difference now, Deku and Bakugo don't look even the slightest bit concerned. They've faced villains before, and these guys will be no different. Deku and Bakugo give each other a look before they launch both of each other. Deku grabbing Bakugo, spinning around and launching him like a missile, and Bakugo blasting the ground out beneath Deku as he launches himself even faster as Deku spins up on that ground that has now been blown up into the air as he launches himself and some of those chunks as missiles basically towards the enemy. The villains basically being bombarded with shrapnel from all of the pavement, Bakugo then blowing into them, and then Deku tearing in like a tornado as suddenly both of them are swept up by a purple mist and sent away. Deku and Bakugo, realizing that they're now somewhere else, look around and see all of these low-ranking villains smiling at them. Then Deku and Bakugo give each other a look, and then they bounce off each other as they begin tearing through these villains. Deku destroying the weapons of and destroying the armor of, and Bakugo just blasting away entire groups. These villains did not stand even the tiniest bit of a chance. By the time they're done with their section, Bakugo has actually noticed that Aizawa is in need of help against the Nomu. So Deku and Bakugo, they launch themselves over to the Nomu, just in time for All Might to arrive. They buy Aizawa just enough time to get away without any major injuries, as All Might launches himself over there. Bakugo and Deku immediately try to turn around and re-enter the fight. All Might's having none of it though, as he's just going at it with the Nomu, faster than even Bakugo and Deku can keep up. The Nomu finally gets All Might pinned in a portal, and then Deku and Bakugo both immediately step in, along with the help of Shoto. As the Nomu is frozen, Bakugo is flung at it, blasts it through the portal, and Deku attacks the portal guy, which causes the Nomu to get sliced in two from the portal. The Nomu, as it begins to heal, is immediately grabbed by All Might and launched up into the upper atmosphere. The villains immediately start trying to retreat, but with the portal guy slightly distracted by Deku, they are forced to fight a little bit more, giving All Might almost the opportunity to take down Shigaraki right as the portal opens, and All Might is now outside. This buys them just enough time to make their retreat. After the villains have made their escape, Deku and Bakugo look around, and they see that dozens of pro heroes have shown up from the teaching staff, moments too late to take part in the fight. Skipping forward a bit, just a couple days, and we'll be picking up with All Might going over a few things with Deku and Bakugo. He tells them how impressed he is with how they actually handled themselves and handled the whole situation. They did the work of actual pro heroes for once. Deku seems quite pleased with himself, while Bakugo is slightly disappointed they didn't get to take down that big guy once and for all. Then all three of them begin practicing together, trying to figure out how should they actually deal with teleporters like that. Bakugo works on his sudden stops to make it sure that he's able to actually adjust, and Deku begins working on his air movement, using his Tasmanian devil quirk to actually get up into the air and one for all to step around in the air. It's now time for the UA Sports Festival training. Izuku actually gets some pointers from All Might on how to actually incorporate both quirks into his fighting style, and it leads to Deku basically achieving this newfound speed demon form. And while he can only maintain it for a few minutes at a time, he is basically unstoppable in terms of speed. However, immediately after he drops it, his body is just so strained from all of the one for all supercharging, while maintaining the super speed from the Tasmanian devil quirk. During the first round of the UA Force Festival, Izuku is able to basically launch himself right out of the get-go. With one quick one-for-all assisted step, he and Bakugo are flying. He throws Bakugo towards one of the giant mechs, and Izuku takes on the other, both destroying the zero-pointers. They then bounce from there as Bakugo launches himself with a massive wave of explosions, and Izuku basically air steps and then tornadoes his way there, spinning up so much dust that most of the other students can't even see them, quite literally leaving them in their dust. It's pretty much a neck and neck race for Deku and Bakugo as they're trying to cross that finish line. For every step that Deku has to slow down to take, Bakugo basically just propels himself forward. Then when they get to the rope section, Deku spins up a storm and launches himself by stepping on the ground at the right place at the right time, with one for all supercharging his step, propelling himself straight across. By the end of the race, Deku's barely managed to edge out at Bakugo. If it wasn't for one for all, Bakugo may have actually won this just because it's a straight line. Moving on to round 2. With Deku with the 1,000,000 points, he puts together a team of Bakugo, Ochako, and Kirishima. Now that with those four working together, they are next to unstoppable. With Bakugo on top, Deku at the front, Kirishima on the right, they can use them as a shield, and Ochako making them all weightless, they're pretty much able to spend the entire time in the air. Anyone who even tries to get close to them is just blasted straight back down. No competition at all. Shoto is pretty much the only person who can even try to get to them. But, because he's not using his fire at this point, his ice just isn't able to do pretty much anything to them. They just destroy it. Explosion after explosion. Even Deku's able to tear straight through it. And then we move on to the tournament's third round, with Deku's team winning the first 2 rounds. The first round goes pretty much as usual, with Shinso actually getting the upper hand on Deku as he makes a sound to actually respond. This almost KOs Deku. Fortunately, the spirits within One For All free him and allows him to actually do something this round. And while Deku doesn't sympathize quite so much with Shinso this time round, he has always had that feeling that his quirk does always seem slightly more villainous, but he's never really let that get to him because of his relationship with Bakugo. They both have very destructive quirks, but neither of them have really considered being a villain with them. It's just not who they are. Moving on to the second round, we've got Deku and Shoto. Hearing Endeavor in the crowd, Deku looks over to see the number 2 hero encouraging Todoroki to actually use his fire side. Deku, who's pretty much been training with Bakugo this entire time, almost feels personally attacked by the fact that Todoroki isn't using his fire side, so he spends the entire match edging it out of him. And while the end result is similar, Deku's intentions are less noble and more Goku-like, in that he wants the best fight. He wants to beat him at his best because, well, he thinks he can. Now this fight goes to be even more epic than in the anime. Ice and fire launching everywhere, but Deku is just bouncing off of the ice, bouncing around the fire. And in this version of events, we have a clear winner as Deku launches Todoroki out of the arena. Todoroki is just barely able to put up an ice wall to actually stop himself from smashing into the stone wall. And then we move on to fight number 3 with Bakugo. They've both been looking forward to this since the start of this tournament. They made each other a promise that no matter what, they'd both be in that final bout. And now they're there. Now it's time for them to show off what they've really got. And oh boy, it's like explosions start going off. Within 10 seconds, the arena is in ruins. Bakugo put his hand to the ground and blew up the arena to avoid Deku having actually anything to stand on, which puts them mostly on equal playing field since they've got to both bounce around in the air. Bakugo is able to maneuver a bit better in the air though, with Deku having to use One For All to actually keep himself up. This makes the fight basically fair since Deku's mostly using One For All to keep himself in the air. Bakugo is able to keep blasting into him. The question becomes, is Bakugo going to run out of stamina first or will Deku? And after almost 15 minutes of solid explosions, a constant fireworks array, and 2 blows of movement in the air, the fight ends to show that Bakugo has beat Deku. You can see that Izuku is standing slightly outside of the arena, or at least where the arena was, and Bakugo is still barely floating in the arena, one arm fairly shattered, the other arm blasting the ground to keep himself in the air. And that is how the UA Sports Festival has ended. With Izuku in second place, Bakugo in first place, barely, and Shoto in a clear third or fourth. You can see All Might handing out the awards, Izuku standing on the second podium, slightly shocked that he actually got ringed down. Bakugo holding one of his arms that's slightly broken, as someone has gone to go get the nurse, and All Might hands him the medal. Bakugo looks at the crowd and says, "Yeah, I'm number 1. And none of you had better forget it." He looks at All Might and points to him. "I'm coming for that spot." And yeah, it's been great coming onto your channel. I hope you all enjoyed my section of the What If. I actually quite enjoyed this one since this is not actually a topic I was super familiar with. Up until you pitched the idea of doing the Tasmanian Devil, just didn't occur to me. But it was actually quite fun to do. Now, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Take care, and peace out mortals, having an amazing day.